Good morning. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee. I am Mitchell Englander, Chair of the committee. Today is Tuesday, November 1st. I want to thank you all for being here as well. I'd like to thank Councilmember O'Farrell as well. And I know that Councilwoman Martinez will not be here. She had a personal matter, a family issue that she's dealing with, as well as Mr. Buscaino. And we are expecting quorum shortly, but we'll go ahead and get started. I know that Councilmember Bonin is sitting in traffic and on his way here. So with that, I have a number of items that I'd like to consider for consent. Items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Unless colleagues want to hear otherwise, we'll go ahead. Those will be approved on consent, and we'll reconsider those if and when once we have a quorum as well. Okay, so those are approved. With that, we'll go ahead and hear items 1, 7, 9, and 10. We'll start with those. And also, if there are any members of the public or anybody wishing to speak, while we don't have a quorum yet, we'll consider those cards once we do. And do we have any cards as of now?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, and so with that, let's go ahead then and hear item 7, cybersecurity tabletop exercise. And if there are any folks from the departments that can come on up on item 7. Hello.
Good morning.
Ms. Burton, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good
How
to
are
see
you?
this morning? Great.
Good.
So I didn't really have specific questions to go into the cyber terrorism and security tabletop exercise necessarily. But I did want to get something back on our intrusion center and the cyber, I know that we're calling it ISOC now. We've changed the working name. But with that, if I can get a report back, and I think we can take that one offline, which is fine. Just report back to me, to my office on exactly where we're at. I know it was due to come online and we were waiting for some additional equipment, but the meetings were taking place regularly. So I wanted to get a detailed report, maybe even come over to take an updated tour where things are at, and so we can go ahead and schedule that. But is there anything in terms of, I mean, one statement or phrase that sort of sticks in my mind that I've always heard and I believe to be true, particularly as it pertains to cyber threats and risk of vulnerability, is that if everybody has been hacked, and if you haven't been hacked, it's just simply because you don't know it. I believe that statement to be true, that everybody has been hacked in some sense. And in looking at moving forward with our cybersecurity and doing these tabletop exercises, is there anything, a lot of it is highly confidential and sensitive information, and I realize and appreciate and understand that as well. Is there anything that you would share publicly in lessons learned from the exercise, or a message to any of the departments, or what we need to do to move forward next steps publicly?
Anna Burton with the city's emergency management department. I think a tremendous value was held. This was our second cyber terrorism or cyber threat exercise that we've conducted, and we will be considering more for the future. But in terms of information for the vast number of employees, ongoing training as to the impacts, the number of attacks that the city has, I think was definitely eye-opening, and how easy it is to stop those threats or the continual risk of making city information available to the general public. So I think definitely training, the impact to our systems, the potential impact to our systems will continue to grow. And so I think it's that ongoing awareness of what that means to the city's infrastructure.
Okay. Excellent. And will we be conducting these on now a regular basis?
I don't think we have a set program now to conduct them on any regular interval, but it is something we will continue to put into our annual exercise cycle.
Great. Excellent. And with that, so then if we can, if you can just get back to me on scheduling a meeting and setting up perhaps another tour of going over there and meeting with all the folks and finding out exactly what we're doing and what we're not doing, and getting sort of an off-the-record look as the Chair of Public Safety of exactly what we're doing with that initiative. It would be very helpful.
Great.
And I
Thank you.
really appreciate your leadership on this. This is
Thank you.
one of the most important, it's the fastest growing crime, certainly that we've seen in our lifetime, and growing exponentially every day, and threats coming in from all over the world 24 hours a day. And we are incredibly vulnerable. And we saw what happened recently in New York, where they had what they called a minor hack that shut down the internet and crippled the economy and shut everybody down from everything. And so we've seen what can happen, and we haven't yet seen an actual municipality shut down. Thank God, knock on wood. But it's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when that happens. And so, it's one of the
That's
most
our mantra.
important things we can do. Yes, it's your bumper sticker. It's above your door on everything. Yes.
Yes.
So thank you so much for everything. Colleagues, do you have anything on this? No. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So we have a quorum. So we'll go ahead and thanks, Mr. Bonden, for being here. I know traffic was horrendous this morning as well.
You can put me on the consent item.
We'll put you. Okay. We'll go ahead and reconsider all the items for consent 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. And approve those items. Do we have any cards on, for public comment,
No,
general
Mr.
public comment?
No, Mr.
Okay, so
Chair.
we'll open and close general public comment. Do we have any cards on the items?
No, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
so we'll close submission of all cards on any items as well.
And Mr. Chair, for the record, what was the recommendation for item number 7?
Number 7 was simply to approve the report and send it to council. There was not a recommendation, but a request that won't be part of the approval, a personal request to just set up the meeting and get a tour of the latest ISOC. So we'll just approve it as presented.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and go over to item 1.
And item number 1 is a motion from Council Members Englander and Buscaino relative to options for prohibiting the advertisement of marijuana if recreational use is approved by the voters in November.
So I'm not sure that we have anybody actually here to speak on that at this point. So what I'd like to do is move this to council, but the idea of this, and let me frame it and put it in some context. We've had numerous discussions in a lot of committee meetings, a lot of public comment and testimony on advertising and alcohol and tobacco over many years on city property, and what that means and how we control it, has it deal with our contracts from some of the city vendors, as well as bus benches and other places, and zoos, parking lots, parks, arenas, all those things that we own and operate or contract for, and have now, through a lot of public testimony and comment and new ordinances, essentially we've banned advertising of alcohol and tobacco on city property. It's really that simple, and for obvious reasons. Not banning it anywhere else, because we don't have the authority under First Amendment and everything, and haven't looked to do that, but we have moved to ban it there. And so looking at marijuana in the same context, particularly as we're nearing not only the November vote, but also the March initiative, of looking to do the same. And one of the questions we've got for the city attorney that hopefully we can get answered by the time we vote on the initiatives in council today will be, can we simply amend the current ordinances we have to include marijuana, and or do we need to include it in the ballot language that we'll be voting on today, or can we take separate action items to do that? So we're going to ask the city attorney to look into that and hopefully report back today on council and give us some input and direction and guidance on that. And so is there any comments or suggestions, my colleagues? Yes.
Just a few. Maybe they're rhetorical at this point since you're going to send it to council, but in terms of marijuana being, I think it's called Schedule 1 federal category, is there some sort of conflict or some sort of relationship with the legality of marijuana being advertised through FCC regulation and at the local level, or do we know of those possible conflicting situations or desires, potential desires from the marijuana industry? And then in terms of Prop 64, I don't think that would have the ability to overturn federal law, which would bring in a whole set of questions as well. But clarifying those matters would be helpful, I think, to the conversation.
Yeah, so good comments. Absolutely. And what happens, with Prop 64, what happens in the March initiative, and does that then change, what we have already in the books? And then if we do move forward with new or updated, modified ordinances to prohibit the advertising on city property, does that change with the ballot initiative then?
Right.
Or does it all go up in smoke?
Right.
I got to figure that out.
That's a nice little metaphor. I think everyone missed either everyone missed it or they got it and they just stayed silent. But
right.
yeah, I think we're going to want to have the menu of options so that we can exert local control is the bottom line. Yeah.
All right, so with no objection, we'll go ahead and approve that and send it on to council. Great, excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for those comments. All right, number 9, long-term electrical blackout emergency preparedness plan. We really have no acronym on that yet? Wow. All right, can you report back on a proper acronym, please?
Let's hope to God we never do.
Yes.
Good morning.
Morning.
Rob Freeman, Operations Division Chief of the city's Emergency Management Department.
Larry Meyerhofer, Emergency Management Department.
Or if you could just give us an overview. This is one I didn't want to go on consent because I think it's just too important. And what the long-term electrical emergency plans are, particularly since in looking at how to mitigate and prepare for those, and what we're looking at, and what just sort of walk us through the reports and action items, and what you think need to be done, what we should start looking at next steps on.
Thank you, sir. Well, the report before the committee today summarizes a number of levels of preparedness that are already in place. Among those are a series of existing emergency operations plans and annexes where we have already anticipated and thought about this type of scenario. The main one is the Critical Infrastructure Interruption Annex, and it deals with major infrastructure, water systems, electrical power, natural gas, information communications among them. So the city already has a plan that identifies both mitigation and pre-event efforts that need to be taken, as well as response and recovery efforts. So we detailed that in the report as far as some of the specific provisions. We could answer questions if you have more detailed questions on that, but simply put, the city already has a plan in place that envisions how will we come together as a city before, during, and after a disaster in the event we have the power interruption, whether it be from an earthquake or, as you were mentioning, this could be a cyber attack, something of that nature. In addition, there are a series of more agency-specific plans. These are continuity of operations plans and departmental emergency plans. So those are required by mayoral executive directive. So each agency is asked to identify critical functions that they need to continue even when bad things happen, and how you would have workarounds to do those in the event that you are lacking infrastructure or lacking capabilities due to the disaster. So how well prepared are our city agencies to continue their functions with loss of power? And that gets to issues such as facility generators or mobile generators that the city has available, and how those could be deployed. And so there's a range of scenarios with city departments. And then we touch on some of the planning and training activities that we're doing, specifically the cybersecurity tabletops and initiatives that you're familiar with. And and then some initiatives that we're working on with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that is assisting the city in identifying sites that would need backup electrical power and looking how we could tap into federal resources in addition to what the city has. And then a huge issue of how well equipped are our city facilities to accommodate a mobile generator. Some facilities, such as City Hall East, already have the external configuration plug equipment that allows for a rapid deployment and hookup of a mobile generator. And the city has a fleet, and Army Corps of Engineers has additional generators. Some facilities lack that, so there's an assessment process ongoing, and there are some funding issues as far as how well prepared are our critical city facilities to accept mobile generation capabilities. And then there are some other elements of the report that were prepared specifically by the Department of Water, Power, and Police. But EMD's role is primarily as a coordination point on the planning, training, and preparedness end.
Are we looking at, this is more than a receive and file type report from my perspective. This is something that needs to be an action item, something that we should have report backs regularly, something we should do a deep dive on for every department. I would guarantee that every department throughout the city of Los Angeles is absolutely not prepared for long-term electrical blackouts. And that would be and will be devastating to service delivery, particularly prioritizing the departments. So I would look at, if we could, report back on coming up with a list of, priorities by department. Which ones need to be up and running first, and in what order, and maybe categorize from an A, B, and C, or level 1, 2, and 3, and prioritizing those and saying, here's what we need to do to look at funding to get those operational, to make sure that we have those properties identified, those departments identified, and who needs to come online first. And then an explanation of why. So I think a full assessment, a little deeper dive needs to be done on, and then what I believe we need to do is, and I've given this a lot of thought, once we prioritize, we need to start costing out what it would take to get those done, because one of the things you mentioned is funding. And this is something we have to prioritize. We've labeled ourselves as the best prepared city in the nation. But looking at our power grid and our electrical systems and long-term blackouts and what that would mean changes that completely. And ensuring that we are the best prepared city, we've got to make sure that those departments are operational quickly and what that means. So if we could take another crack at reporting back and looking at every department, and that's one of the things, and I think you've done a great job in highlighting, is identifying the roles and responsibility of each city department. So that's a great first step. And then categorizing those next on priority, which ones need to come online first. Identifying the vulnerabilities and which properties don't have the hookups is also a critical step. But once we have, again, those prioritized, we can then do a deeper dive on, okay, now that we have them prioritized, which ones are ready and are pre-wired, if you will, which ones are not. And let's focus on those first then. And so if we could start working on that and bring that back. And one of the things that Ms. Burton has said and always says, and I absolutely believe this to be true, it's not a matter of if, but when something happens. We've got to be prepared. So I'll just ask if that could be done and report back to this committee on that in the next, you tell me, 60, 90, 120 days. It's a big task. So.
Very good. I think 90 days would be feasible for us.
Okay, that'd be great.
That would be okay with the committee. Some departments and facilities have fixed site generators, so they've already engineered the solution. Their main issue is maintenance, fueling, things of that nature. We could be in a disaster like a catastrophic earthquake where not only are we dealing with power outages, but difficulties in bringing fuel into the area. The generators are great, but you got to keep them fueled. So police facilities, fire facilities are probably ahead of most. some agencies are reliant on this fleet of mobile generators maintained by the Department of General Services, and I think that's where there is a need to categorize those. The project that we've been working on with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is a head start with that.
Mm-hmm.
We've already identified a number of sites. Larry can probably give you a little bit more on that, Councilman.
Yeah, I chaired the what they call EPFAT. It's Emergency Power Facility Assessment Tool of the Army Corps.
I knew there'd be an acronym somewhere coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one's a
Wait
doozy.
for it. Right.
Anyway, Emergency Power Facility Assessment Tool is a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer program. It's a web-based database. I led a task force starting in 2014 for over a year where we actually had 6 different departments that went through with the Army Corps with their how their system works, and they assessed over 50 critical city facilities that they actually did evaluate based on their department critical needs, where they lined up as far as what they needed. Some of those departments are General Services, that is the one of the main departments for providing maintenance to all the city buildings. So they were the main player.
And our communication systems
Yes.
for police and fire, and we've seen what happens when those go down. So, yes.
So they assessed them. We have Rec and Parks. Obviously, Rec and Parks is a major player because they're the lead in sheltering after a major disaster. So if there was a major earthquake, as you know, Rec and Parks would have to identify park facilities that they would shelter, and obviously backup power is a main concern. But they have their own maintenance and construction services. So they, I believe, assessed 20 Rec and Park facilities that they considered critical and usable after a major earthquake. And their electricians actually were part of the 6 different departments. Electricians were members of the task force. And so we were working with those actual hands-on technicians to go through those critical facilities, assess their electrical infrastructure in each building, and entering the information into the Army Corps' database. And what that does is it gives us about a 3-day lead so that the Army Corps doesn't have to come out and assess those buildings before shipping the generators out in the assistance after a major earthquake.
So in the event of a major earthquake and or other disaster where we have a long-term electrical blackout, we refer to a online web-based database that we may not be able to access because the systems are, I'm kidding, I'm going through that. Right.
Well, it's out of state.
I'm assuming we've got redundant backups locally that have the inventory of our local.
Right. We have in-house generators that GSD and these other departments already has, portable generators. Some buildings have critical on-site big diesel generators waiting in case there is a blackout. But the Army Corps, we would reach out to if there was a major disaster and we needed mutual aid assistance. And what this does is it pre-identifies all the critical buildings in their database so they have the information ahead of time and they can ship them immediately.
Do we have, when you say ship them from where?
I believe it's in Texas where
That's
they
the
store
problem.
them.
That's an issue. If you could look at what it would take to pre-deploy some of those here, I don't know why they would all be somewhere out of state. We ran into this recently with the Aliso Canyon gas leak, where the equipment they needed, they had to ship in from out of state, and it took a month to get the equipment here and operational. So in the meantime, it's only methane and benzene and toluene and all the other dangerous, toxic carcinogens that were spewing into the community for a month before they can even start the work of drilling to shut them down. But in any event, what we've seen is what happens when you've got to deploy equipment. Now, that's with the infrastructure in place. That's with no freeway systems shut down. And you can imagine the logistics and nightmares. What would happen is if you've got 2 or 3 major arteries of perhaps it's the 101, the 5, and the 210 all shut down because of collapsed infrastructure, and you've got to bring those systems in, then what? So there may be an opportunity to ask them that we would be happy to host and bring them to Texas should Texas have a problem. But maybe there's a way to pre-deploy some of those systems here and maybe look at that.
Yeah, one of the members is Ann Hutton. She works for the Army Corps of Engineers. She may be able to join us next time to speak on their behalf on the time it would take to ship them here. But it's a great tool that and I'm very happy to report that 50 to 75 facilities, critical city facilities, have already been assessed, and that information is in the database. So we're ahead of the game at one point, but you're right. There's a lot more we could do on this.
There's always more, right?
Yeah.
So
And Councilman, that's one mutual aid resource that's available. Certainly getting a jump start on how that would tie into existing city facilities so that we can make that a more rapid mutual aid resource. But in the event of a long-term power outage, no matter what the cause, we would be activating the city's emergency operations center. So we would be bringing to bear all available resources, not only U.S. Army Corps of Engineer resources, but resources that city agencies have, county, state, federal partners, as well as our private sector partners. So one of the key features in our EOC now is a business operations center where we can reach out to the television and film studios, to the private sector construction companies, and other local resources. There are a lot of generators in Southern California. The challenge will be there'll be competing demands in a large event, and to try to identify these resources ahead of time and to have a system in place for coordinating that. So your EOC stands ready according to these plans to not only look at what the Army Corps can bring in, but what our other partners can bring in.
yeah.
I had a couple of questions, but they're sort of addressed by your recommendation.
Okay.
So I'm good there.
Okay, so we'll just ask in 90 days. Go ahead, we'll hold that in committee and come back with those lists. Thank you thanks you for all your effort on this. This is really important. Really, truly appreciate it. Okay, and that leaves us with the final item 10, the Administrative Citation Enforcement Program Quarterly Report. Ace?
Good morning.
Good morning. Just feel free to go ahead and walk us through the report.
Thank you. Good morning. Rita Hernandez-Venegas, Supervising Attorney of the ACE program.
And, Ted Jordan from the City Attorney's Office. I'm the Public Works General Counsel.
And I'm Bill Mangan from the City Attorney's Office, also with the ACE program.
Good morning.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. We are here. We are to file a quarterly report with council, and we did that. And we're also here to ask council's approval to add Bureau Street Services to the ACE program as a participating agency, which we have supplied in the quarterly report. The request to include them along with the sections that they would primarily be enforcing. Council, when adopting the ordinance, did authorize the entire municipal code. However, when we first started in the pilot, LAPD was desirous of starting out with the pilot list of offenses, which has grown significantly just based on our compliance rates. When we filed this report with council, we had subsequent meetings, and we are also wishing to add a couple of sections for Bureau Street Services. The first section would be the 62.169, which is the tree trimming permit requirement. The second one would be 14.41I, which is injury to public property. That being said, this would be for minor injury. If there is significant injury to city property or city trees, then it would be our suggestion that Bureau of Street Services in the Urban Forestry Division file a report and submit that to the city attorney for misdemeanor filing consideration. So this would just be for minor offenses, which the department felt could be curable or to curb subsequent behavior.
What's an example of an injury to public property?
Well, it relates actually, in some cases, to another a tool that we have dealing with the trees.
Okay.
But it would really apply to many different types of public property, often in the public right-of-way.
Sure. Okay.
And these would be for minor offenses only. Again, and I review every citation that is submitted to the ACE unit for processing, and if there are certainly some citations for LAPD that I have referred for prosecution, and if based on the information that we have, we feel that it may be a criminal filing, we would reach out to that agency to have them submit a report for misdemeanor consideration.
So another example, so minor is 14.41I and major is 62.169.
No, 62.169 is a tree
Right,
permit.
right. But you also mentioned injury to trees in 14.41I.
I think the minor is that, if it's a minor injury or a tree trimming that is not an extensive,
Right.
killing of
Right.
multiple trees, those might be considered more minor.
Yeah.
Which would be more appropriate for the ACE citation
Right.
program. However, as with the entire ACE program, when there's a truly greater scale in the violation or the harm being done, there's the
So-
ability to cite this as a criminal violation.
So if it's the kind of damage that happened to the Silver Lake trees last December, it would be under 62.169,
They could theoretically fall under either.
more or less?
Yes.
And that's in addition to the ACE program, or no, that's existing?
That is currently existing, but this would allow it to be cited into the ACE program.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And there's just one other section. It's 56.12, obstruction on streets and sidewalks by commercial business owners. To distinguish that from personal, we're trying to distinguish it from
Yep.
personal property.
Exactly. 5612 was added to our code at the time we were doing significant revisions to 5611. It used to be in the old 5611, all types of these, issues of property being put onto the sidewalk area in the public right-of-way were covered by 5611. But because of, various reasons, we've amended 5611 and created 5612 to distinguish between property issues in the public right-of-way that are homeless-related versus property issues in the public right-of-way that are really more commercial businesses that are sort of expanding out into the public right-of-way. So 5612 is a good thing to add to this.
And the other item that is in the report, we would like to present and prepare a revision to the judicial review section that's currently in the ordinance. There seems to be a conflict in paragraph C, where the time for filing an appeal in writs and receivers would be 90 days versus the government code, which is 20 days. I believe when this ordinance was drafted, it was anticipated that most of the cases would be handled like our parking appeals have been handled. And I had a couple of appeals in Superior Court on those, and one over in Superior Court on the 1094. So we would just be working with on some cleanup language.
What muni code is that one?
That is the judicial review
is it
portion in the ACE ordinance. It's 11.2.10. And I'm not sure if you would wanted to hear from the police department. We have Office of Operations, who's our partner in the ACE program, along with Detective Ben Jones, who is a supervisor of the Criminal Investigation Division, who handles all the permits for the City of Los Angeles through the Police Commission. There are 52 permits that are now part of ACE. They were not originally. The first one we added was valet, and we came back and asked for any permit that was enforced through them to be able to be cited administratively.
A couple general questions. One's for LAPD, but some are more general. So when we started this in this committee, I guess it was a year or so ago, and we were coming up with a list of the offenses that LAPD could include in ACE, we added in violations of the leaf blower ordinance. I don't see that in the breakdown. Can you tell me if there were any citations issued?
There's actually one issued in your district, and it is not in this reporting, not in this quarterly report, and actually received a request from one of your constituents, so there has been one in the prior quarter.
We think it was your address as well. We're looking at
It certainly wasn't. I'm sure it was Mr. Wolfberg, actually. But
we cannot confirm or
do we know that West LA, specifically the police division West LA, is aware of the ability to use ACE as a tool? It's where I get the most complaints.
Yes, I actually did roll call. I've done the roll call training at 21 division specialized units. I mean, I spent a month in the Valley doing every roll call, and I did do roll call training at West LA and Pacific Division. If there are some training issues, I'm certainly willing to call the training coordinator today to see if there's any more information I could provide them. But they have citation books that are available, and that topic was raised during training, that oftentimes by the time they actually get to the location, the person is gone because they may be responding, to other radio calls. And I also live in CD11, and as you're aware, sometimes there's not that many cars, that are available for patrol. So, and some folks, don't understand that if they're on a call, it's difficult to leave a Part 1 crime call to go to a leaf blower.
Where in CD11 do you live?
In Playa.
Okay. Vista or Del Rey?
Del Rey.
Okay.
Just
two Playas.
north of the high school.
Okay.
Which one's your favorite play?
I like them both equally. So you mentioned the different areas you gave training. That sort of brings up another question I had. Is there any breakdown available by community police area of how many ACE citations have been issued? I'm sort of curious if there's certain parts of the city where it's been implemented more than others.
I can provide you with that. We are part of ComStat now. So that being said, every ComStat, every deployment period, we provide a report that is broken down by division and by offenses. I can get that to your staff if you would like.
That'd be great. I'd also be curious to see if there is any breakdown by how the violations were initiated or brought to law enforcement, like whether it was a proactive patrol that was out and saw something, or it was a citizen call for service, or it was a special detail or something like that.
Unfortunately, the citation will not provide that information. It will just be the elements of the offense and any other information that the officer feels is necessary to process the citation. Mr. Jones can probably speak to the Criminal Investigation Division. Theirs are more, proactive investigation.
Is there a way to capture that going forward? Because I think, the thinking on this, at least for some of us, was that this is the kind of stuff that would be captured in sort of the regular course of a day, is that it wouldn't so much be a call, but you're driving down the street and you see a violation. ACE is a good way to deal with it.
And I have Ms. Rafish is here, but certainly not on the citation itself. There are incident numbers that are created on many of the citations that I receive that may or may not be a call for service or regular or just an observation. It would be something we'd have to discuss with the police department as to whether or not we could make that a field, a box, or something that they would check. I'm not sure, but we could certainly check into that with Police General Counsel. And
do you have any idea if Animal Services has issued any citations for illegal feeding of coyotes?
Yes, there is. We have issued one, and that case is being set for a city attorney hearing.
Okay, all right.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Given where you live, you're familiar with the coyote issue.
We have
people
everywhere.
feeding coyotes outside of schools in her neighborhood.
Yes. This one is right in Playa, right at the water.
Thank you.
At the Hyperion. That's a city attorney hearing.
A few questions? Sure, thank you. So for the police department, do you have just a sense of the ACE violations in terms of the most common
Well, the most common
infraction?
seem to be, and it's in this report for this quarter, seem to be alcohol related, whether it's drinking in public, and I know certainly in your district it's widely used in the Hollywood Entertainment District because of all the ABC locations that there are. So they cite a lot for drinking in public along with open container adjacent to or on the posted premises. of ABC locations. So they're mainly alcohol-related. Not much of a recidivism rate. There's a couple of percent, and it's mainly drinking in public, and it's going to be in the Skid Row area.
Okay. What about loud parties or excessive noise
We
in
have
residential neighborhoods?
In this reporting period, it made up almost 5% of the citations. However, and this went through June, I saw an upsweep in citations, mainly in Hollywood, in your district, along with the valley areas. There's a lot of party calls, so that would have been, that'll be in the next quarter's report, but I can give your staff a breakdown of those as well. But it was about 5% for this quarter.
Just to get a sense, I appreciate
Right.
that. And then as far as the, I first want to thank the City Attorney's Office for adding illegal tree trimming, because it, although not terribly frequent, it is a regular occurrence, and it always has been across the city. And so I'm glad we have another tool to combat that, because I think the regulation we have is very weak, and really billboard companies just get away with clear-cutting trees that block a billboard right and left, and they always have. So I hope we can beef up our enforcement there, and maybe this is a new tool. So I appreciate that, and this is something that went through Public Works Committee that we pushed. So thank you for that. Another question is, how soon will Bureau Street Services be able to, when does this, roll out? When does this enforcement begin?
Well, we would have to go to council. They have submitted what their citation is going to look like. So it's been vetted. It looks good. It's good to go. So as soon as council approves it, they will be ready to go. And I will provide, and I've been working with Mr. Gary Harris and Tom Caraballo, I will be doing all of their training for their enforcement officers as far as what's the evidence needed on the citation. Remember, these for the most part, are all misdemeanors, so we have to ensure that a misdemeanor is committed in the officer's presence and that those elements are on the citation. So I will work with them on that, as well as provide some insight as to the criminal filing process, as to the more egregious violations of the injury or the injury itself.
I love the ACE program. And I know that one of the very legitimate refrains from street use inspectors and Bureau of Street Services, from Mr. Harris and others, they've never had enough staff. And I hope that you're building in your budget requests. This is quality of life stuff. And this is the kind of thing that our neighborhoods beg for all the time. And we've never had enough staff. And I would like to prioritize this as an elected official to allocate more funding for additional staff so that we can really improve the quality of life for our constituents through the ACE program. I think that it should be right up there with our top priorities across the city. As we begin, there's a spike in crime, but it's still at historic lows, and that's a good thing. Now we can start taking advantage of actually improving the quality of life through ACE enforcement in our neighborhoods. So I'm going to be preaching the gospel of getting more street use inspectors and the budgeting for more street use inspectors along those lines too. So that's my little soapbox speech about that. And another question I have is, City Attorney's Office, are you in partnership with LAUSD or in discussions with partnership about some sort of taking advantage or an agreement to utilize the ACE program at school campuses?
Actually, yes, we are. We met with them originally 2 weeks ago. We met with their staff, the deputy chief, I believe it's Farias or Arias last week, and I'm meeting with Chief Zipperman. Bill and I are this afternoon at 2:30. They have a force of 450 officers. They're very, very desirous of participating with the ACE program, and as the ordinance requires, to be an enforcement officer, you either have to have and you're not LAPD, an MOA or an MOU with us, which they have. So we are trying to start to form a partnership. We're meeting with the chief today. They have a lot of issues around the school. Most of them are the vending issues, skateboarding issues, which your district seems to have a lot of skateboarding issues as well.
Which is why I'm building skate parks wherever I possibly can. But yeah, you're right. And I think that's a great partnership. Sometimes there's a void, it's city property, and then, school police take care of that, but LAPD, I would love to close that gap.
There is a big gap. It's, unfortunately, we don't have LAPD staff to be, every school. So
Right.
they need and want the ability to be able to use Citations at the schools throughout the city.
Terrific. Thank you.
I had a question that sort of follows that same vein. You're talking about LAUSD, but there was also talk in here of including USC.
We actually have spoken to John Thomas, the chief at USC. We are waiting on their formal request to be included in the program, and we'll be setting up a meeting. I know they're in discussions with Sacramento about their peace officer status and all of that. So we've kind of been waiting for them.
I just want to make sure we're not putting the cart before the horse, because this body would need to, the council would need to amend the MOU with USC to allow that. It's not something you can just do administratively, right? Because it's beyond the scope of the current MOU?
Either that or an addendum, you're correct, to,
Right.
to the current MOU, MOA.
Because there's sort of governance and accountability issues in there. I just want to make sure that the council gets to weigh in on that before it just
Right.
happens.
Well, these would be vetted through a number of divisions in the city attorney's office, not just the ACE enforcement group. We'd be going to police general counsel and or all the way to the top on these.
Yeah, I'm
Contract administration and MOUs, right? Is what you-
right. Yeah, I mean, there's the question of accountability and oversight of a whole bunch of different issues that
Sure.
that are sort of policy issues, not just legal issues, that I want to make sure get vetted.
And we have some agreement with them now. We prosecute their cases in the criminal division for,
Right.
any offenses that occur in the area by the public safety officer. So they are submitted for criminal filing, so there would have to be an amendment made to allow them
Okay.
to cite administratively. That
Thanks.
currently doesn't exist.
I want to pick up where Mr. O'Farrell left off on highlighting the fact that this is so important for the quality of life issues in our neighborhoods, and also give credit to my predecessor, Greg Smith, who actually 13 years ago introduced, I remember the motion called the Good Neighbor Motion, and it was based on the broken window theory. The fact that we need to go after but not prosecute and penalize people for not maintaining their properties, people for minor infractions and or misdemeanors where we can have some kind of administrative fee or fine. And this is exactly what came out of this, although it has a lot of fathers, if you will, on the ACE program. But I think it was, I remember having all the community meetings on this and all the neighborhood councils wanting this, and it's great that it's coming together so well. One of the things in the report, page 4, highlighted that there would be, LAPD would be adding additional code sections at their discretion without any council input or reporting to council, is basically what the report highlighted, which is fine. But in focusing on that a little bit, without, it said, I think the terminology was without notice to council. Could we amend that or ask for at least notification back and report backs? I mean, we're having this quarterly, so this is going to be coming back to this committee quarterly anyway, that when they do add code sections, we're informed of what they're going to be citing.
Absolutely. We can include that in the quarterly report.
Okay.
It was just, there's many sections to
Well, I
be
think it was an
added.
idea for them to streamline it, like, okay,
Right.
we don't have to get approval, let's just do it. It's successful, people are, welcoming this, we've ironed out a lot of the wrinkles, and I'm sure that's why it said it the way it did, which is fine, and I don't want to slow it down, but I think if we can still get a report back on actually notifying us on the code sections that are added as part of the quarterly report, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll add that.
We will do that for all departments.
Okay. We're going to add a breakdown by council district to come back per the request of Councilmember Bonnet. So I think we'd all like to see that, not just in CD11, but all council districts.
The breakdown is by police division. There's really no way for us to be able to break it down by councilmatic district.
That's fine. And actually, that's something that we've asked for as well, is to ComStat out by council district and start mapping out by council district, not just police division, report backs that we ask for. So doing the overlay maps, which is easily doable based on the information we have now. And we've actually piloted some of that in my district just to see if we can work it out. It was a little tricky, and it took some time. But We have those maps. Planning department has the maps. We can do the overlays by it. I mean, all that information is entered. It's just a matter of pulling the data out differently. So I'd like to start seeing reports back by council district. So for now, by division's fine, but I'm going to put an emphasis on that. When we start asking report backs by council district, and for years the department has said it's very difficult to pull them out by council district because we report them by division. Well, now that the data is in a relational database and we can map them very, very easily, it's absolutely
Well, if it gets mapped
getting easier every day.
Comstat, then the ACE will be in there.
Right, and then by Comstats, by police division. But there's no reason we can't pull out all information by just using a different map. So I want to start looking at that, not right this second on this, but for all future discussions when we ask for data, I think it's really important for us to see it by council district as well.
We'll set up a meeting with LAPD as well as our processor, because each RD has, four
I know.
digits, so,
The RDs do, but we actually have physical addresses.
right. Well, we'll talk
Right.
to our processor. That's just the way that it's entered now, and with
Oh, I know.
LAPD to
Right.
see how we can make
We
it
start
work.
doing that. That'd be great. And I know that that's something that Councilmember Bonin is really focused on a lot of, I want information back by council district, whatever that might be, whether it's police or fire. And so I think we need to start honing in on data deliverables that have different type of ArcView maps and spatial logic maps that are tied to different base files. So we can pull the information and analyze them a little differently. I mean, we have the data, so it's just a matter of filtering them through different base maps. So I'd like to start looking at some of that, but at least a breakdown then by division for now.
Okay.
That would be great. One of the other things to report back on is another report back on how they are initiated. That was on the capture system or a checkbox. So if you can report back on that per Councilmember Bonin as well, we'd like to ask that that be added to this. And then the last thing is something new from me that I'd like your input on. And if you can get back to me on, we have started a pilot program in one of our divisions, in Devonshire Division, called Community Patrols, where we actually have dedicated cars, city vehicles, with lights, ambers, and citizens actually driving around with the lights on with community patrol, city seals, if you will, driving through our community to deter crime. And it's very similar to, what did we call them with LAPD when we would drive around just with lights on? Hide program? I can't remember the name of it.
Sure.
Well, anyway, so it's very similar to that. There have been other cities that have community patrols that we modeled it after, and we worked for years to get this off the ground. We bought uniforms, we've got everything, and it's working great. It's deterring crime. It's getting our volunteers out there. They don't react or respond. If they see something, they say something, they radio it in. So they've got communication systems so they can have full contact with our officers. But they do deter crime. And so one of the things that they came up with, and I think it's a great idea, is they don't want the ability to write citations when they see something, but they want the ability to write warnings, which I think is great. There's a lot of issues out there that they see, and quite frankly, if they come back with a punch list, a long laundry list of, here, we spotted 50 things out on patrol, if you will, and we're calling them patrols, although it's modified, right? We've spotted 50 things out on in these RDs that we worked in, an abandoned car. We've got, all of these different scenarios, barking dogs, broken windows, whatever they are. And they've got to then turn them over to our senior leads. And you've got 5 or 6 of these out there, and all of a sudden you've got 3, 4, 5, 6 pages that you're turning over to senior leads. Senior leads are already very, very busy, very, very spread thin. You're adding their workloads. They're not going to go out there and have the opportunity and time to follow up. So we're getting backlogged and they thought what would be great is if they had some kind of warning citation or warning sheet or certificate or some kind of thing that they can fill out and just leave at the door or leave with somebody to say, this is a warning, it's not a citation, it's not an ACE citation, that you have this on your property, that you have bulky items that need to be picked up or whatever it is that needs to be done. Here's the information. Here's who you can call. You can call 311, have this taken care of. So something that ACE can spin off to have a warning system for our community patrols. These community patrols, which have been very, very successful, we're going to want to probably expand them into other divisions soon. So I think it's a natural next step. So if you can look into what could be possible, that would be helpful. And just let me know, get back to me on
I
that.
will let Mr. Michelson know as well as Mr. De La Guerra, who's Police General Counsel, about council's request.
Okay, got it. Okay, I think that's all we have. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's approved with those recommendations and modifications. And with that, I believe that concludes the agenda. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you. Be safe.